Hello and welcome to From the Heart. I'm a heart parent and your host, Sami Glastonbury. Today I'm chatting with Dr Shannon Schedlich of Siblings Australia. Shannon's extensive experience across education, research and government sectors have shaped her dedication to strengthening family units and promoting nuanced support for all members. This approach aligns well with HeartKids' mission and addresses a crucial need of broad support network within the childhood-onset heart disease community.
And we're adults, we're theoretically equipped. We have got the resilience, we have got the emotional resources to deal with those sorts of things. The sibling children are in this mix. They're seeing all of these things going on, but they don't necessarily have that emotional toolbox that you develop through a lifetime to deal with those. I hear some parents say things like, oh, they're fine. I'm really struggling, but I know they're fine. I'm like, how could they be?
Before we begin, we would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we record. Today we are recording on country of the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains. We pay our respects to elders past and present who are a part of the world's oldest continuing culture and our first storytellers. We acknowledge the importance of supporting health for all peoples now and in the future. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander listeners should be aware that this podcast may contain images, voices and names of deceased persons. So tonight I've got Shannon in the studio. Welcome, Shannon. Thank you so much for coming. And it's an absolute joy to have you here. We've known each other for a little while now. We have our own interactions with each other. So in my family unit, I have 3 children, 2 siblings, to a son with CHD, but also to my daughter Gigi has also been diagnosed with a heart condition as well. I know very well of the work that you guys do for my family, but for many people around Australia. But it'd be great for you to share, Shannon, and for you to describe the purpose of Siblings Australia.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me here today, Sami. It's great to be able to talk to your community. Siblings Australia is an Adelaide-based organisation that operates nationally, and what we are here to do is to make sure that siblings are seen and supported in both policy and practice. What I say to people is it's sort of about a 2/3, 1/3 split between what we do. We focus on that systemic advocacy, so making sure that when policymakers are looking at family supports, they are also considering the needs of siblings, but also that siblings have the support that they need and families have the support that they need to support sibling children as well. We know that when there are heart conditions or other chronic health or disabilities within a family, it can be really easy for the families, for the parents, to be very focused on that child who's unwell, and understandably. But those sibling children also have needs. So how do we make sure that the whole family unit is supporting itself? We know that when all members of a family are supported, they're going to be better outcomes for everybody. So that's really what we're here to do.
Yeah, it's a phenomenal organisation and the support you provide to so many people. So what are those unique experiences? So what are the experiences that you come across that those siblings are facing? So like you just mentioned, it could be relative to our community, the HeartKids community. It could be someone with a disability. What sort of experiences do you come across daily?
Yeah, it really depends on the family. It's very much as individual as the individual. But we know that siblings can often feel this confusion about what's going on within their family. Perhaps it is a family where the child has had a heart condition that the family hasn't known about, and all of a sudden there's all of these things happening within their family, and there's all of these appointments and potentially surgeries that are going on. And for the sibling who perhaps isn't in those appointments having everything described to them, they're just looking at their world going, oh my goodness, everything has changed. Everything has changed very dramatically, very quickly. We know that a lot of siblings feel like there is so much emphasis on the health of their brother or sister who has the health condition or the heart condition or whatever it is that we're talking about, that they feel that they really need to downplay how they're feeling. So they might be feeling really scared. They might be feeling really anxious. And they might be feeling those things in ways that are totally unrelated to what's going on. Kids have big emotions about all sorts of things, but they feel like they can't bring those up within the family unit because there's something really big going on. The friendship things that they've got going on at school, they're really important to them, but they come home and mum and dad are sitting down at the table going, oh my goodness, okay, how are we going to get the child who has the health condition to hospital, and how are we going to do this and how are we going to do that? And the kid who's got the issues with their friendships going on at the moment goes, oh, maybe I shouldn't be talking about this right now because this isn't really a big deal. This isn't life or death. But it can feel like life or death when you're a kid, right? When you've got those friendship things going on.
Completely, Shannon, completely. And I think even just you spoke to the fact that it's so true that sometimes we as adults forget what it feels like to be a kid. And like you said, this could all be very confusing if all of a sudden they're hearing a lot of medical terms that they don't understand. Like you said, overwhelming. But also too, I love the fact that you even just spoke to that I think sometimes we don't stop and think that what's going on for them is really big. And like you said, if all of a sudden my friendship problem is actually really insignificant to my brother or sister's heart condition, maybe I won't bother mum and dad with it.
Yeah. And those things can then sort of snowball from there. Absolutely, they can. And for the kid who is very sort of in tune with their family, that can be really, really hard. I think one of the things that we also forget about being a kid is kids pick up on a whole heap of things that are going on within a family, right? And sometimes as the parents, we are facing these issues where we feel completely overwhelmed by what's happening. We feel scared. We are perhaps feeling grief or sadness or all of these myriad emotions that can come when there is a significant issue going on within a family. And we're adults, we're theoretically equipped. We have got the resilience, we have got the emotional resources to deal with those sorts of things. The sibling children are in this mix. They're seeing all of these things going on, but they don't necessarily have that emotional toolbox that you develop through a lifetime to deal with those. I hear some parents say things like, oh, they're fine. I'm really struggling, but I know they're fine. I'm like, how could they be?
It's really interesting hearing you all say this. So that kind of brings me to that next point. Like you said, so you're approached by someone, they say, I'm okay, and I think my other son or daughter isn't. Are there some signs? Are there some signs that you particularly pick up on or that your team within Siblings Australia go, or is there some questions that you ask?
There can be a range of different ways that siblings express that they're not doing okay, and it can be polar opposites. You can have the child who is nothing's ever wrong, everything's fine, everything's good. No, how can I help you? How can I make sure that the adults are being looked after in my life? So we see that in a lot of siblings, that they are, okay, how can I make sure everyone else around me is looked after? And what's that saying about how their actual emotional needs are being met themselves? Some siblings, you see the opposite. You see those outbursts and you see that anger and you see the behaviour. And we have adult siblings talk to us about the fact that they knew at the time they were doing it. They knew they were being, quote unquote, naughty, but they just wanted some attention on them.
That's heartbreaking.
It is. It's really, really hard. You can see sometimes siblings withdrawing, and it can be withdrawing from the family unit, or it can be withdrawing from their brother or sister who's got the heart condition or who has whatever sort of condition it is that's going on. They might be struggling at school. They might be more irritable. They might no longer be doing the things that they used to enjoy. They might sort of downplay, oh, no, actually, I'm not into netball anymore. And when you unpick it a bit, it's actually, well, I know it's hard for mum and dad to get me to netball training. I don't like netball that much anymore. It doesn't really matter. So withdrawing from those sorts of things that they used to like, they might also avoid or be aggressive towards their brother or sister who's got the health condition. And that's a really common thing that can happen as well. As much as they love their brother or sister, they feel like, I'm not getting my needs met because there's something happening in this space. And so I'm going to respond to that, because they don't have that emotional toolkit necessarily yet to deal with.
No, and as adults, like you were speaking to earlier, we've developed our emotional toolkit, and you would hope we've developed emotional regulation. But as soon as you say that, sort of that anger towards the sibling who has either the health condition or the disability, you know, or we know now that anger is really something that hides sadness, isn't it?
Yep, sadness and grief and confusion and all of those sorts of things. There are situations we know where there is vicarious trauma that have gone on for these sibling children because they have been in situations where the family has been preparing for something catastrophic with their child who's got a condition, and it doesn't come to pass. The catastrophic thing happens, but the sibling child then just sort of expected to travel on with their life.
Like just kind of move on. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And without the right supports around that, that can really manifest in that PTSD, essentially, that comes with experiencing trauma or vicarious trauma.
So, Shannon, how can we, the people listening to this podcast, the majority of parents are just starting out their journey, or they're right the way through their journey, or they're been through one lot of open heart surgery, they're getting ready for the next, or they're starting school. How can we as parents create those safe spaces for siblings to actually share how they're really feeling so that we can, I suppose, help them direct it I'm not trying to direct it in a healthy way, but provide them that space so that they don't feel that they have to either go without or put someone else's needs first. Do you have recommendations?
I think the number one thing is to keep the lines of communication open. And that is about what's happening, but it's also about your sibling child's life in general. The thing that I think is really important to remember is that when they're little, their issues might be quite little or their interests might seem quite little, but they're big to them. If you engage with those little conversations when they're little, they're the big conversations for them. So I had a son who was obsessed with Thomas the Tank.
Yep.
Everything about Thomas the Tank. And I went really deep into
Thomas the Tank land. I love it.
I could talk to him about it for hours on end because that was so big in his world at that stage. And I've got a 14-year-old son who can come home to me now and go, hey, Mum, there's some things happening. He came home a couple of years ago, and I won't go into the details of this because it touches on some health things of another child. But he came home and he said to me, he's like, no adults know about this, Mum, but an adult needs to know about this and I need you to do something about it.
Yeah, wow.
And it was through having those conversations with him, and I'm not saying I'm an expert on how to parent. I'm sure that I'm doing a million things wrong.
Oh, no. Yeah, I totally understand what you're saying, though.
Recognising the things that are important to them. I'm also aware that when you are up to your neck, and I'm not a parent of a heart child, I'm a step-parent of a child who's got multiple complex disabilities, I recognise that there are some days where it is like, oh my goodness, how do I come up for air?
Yeah.
But finding those moments where you can just have conversations, whether it's about the big things or the bad things or just the little things that are going on in their lives, and just making sure that they know that you're open to having those conversations, that there is always space for those conversations, is really important. A thing I say to families when they come to me and say, we've got this plethora of things that are happening within our family at the moment, and I don't know how to make the space. I'm like, 5 minutes at the end of the day. I'm like, if you just make 5 minutes at the end of the day where your sibling child knows that that is their space, nothing is encroaching on that, and you can go in and you can talk to them and they can talk to you about anything or nothing, or you can watch 5 minutes of a show, or they can play to you the latest Kendrick Lamar song that's come out. Whatever it is,
yeah.
That they've got that moment each day. I think the other really important thing is to make sure that where you can, you show up for your sibling child on the things that matter for them, because you can't show up for everything on every occasion.
No. And I think we know now, we're so busy just as parents, the way life is now. You think to how we grew up, we didn't have 3 sports on a weekend. We didn't have after school training 3-4 times a week. Life is so busy now, and you're right. But that's a beautiful takeaway, is finding that 5 minutes, finding those 5 minutes to talk about something that's really meaningful to them, but also to, like you said, showing up when you can.
Yeah. And I think the other thing too is to remember to be emotionally vulnerable. We talk about emotional vulnerability in our adult relationships, but I also think that's really important when we're working with our kids. I think it's important for kids to know, oh my goodness, I was scared in that moment. I was worried about your brother or sister, and this is how I felt in that moment. And how did you feel? And admitting that I don't know what's going to happen next. And let's talk about how that makes us feel. That not knowing, like, I'm someone who loves to have things planned out. I can tell you what I'm doing on a Saturday in 5 weeks' time.
And you, Shannon, I didn't know that about you. Well, I need to let you know I live week to week. If you ask me about next week, I can't answer.
Yeah, I am that person, but our life can't be like that. But there are moments where right in the moment I'm like, oh my goodness, my stepdaughter's in hospital right now, and all of a sudden everything's up in the air, and stopping and saying to the kids, okay, wow, okay, this is a bit scary and we don't know what's going to happen, and how are you feeling about that? And allowing yourself that emotional vulnerability with your kids, not emotionally dumping on them, absolutely not. I think that's a really important clear you need to make, that don't put your fears on your sibling children, expect them to deal with them, but talk to them about, okay, this is something that we're not used to. It was really scary, like when we woke up in the middle of the night and we realised something was going wrong, and we all of a sudden had an ambulance in the driveway. You know, how did you feel about that? And allowing them the space to say I was scared or I was confused, or when things happen that mean that things don't go as planned. An example from my own family that is disability specific, my stepdaughter, she has autism and loved the beach. And on Christmas Eve a couple of years ago, we organised a big family picnic with some friends on the beach for Christmas Eve. And that was the day that she decided that she hated the beach.
Oh, wonderful. Oh, wonderful.
Yeah. So we had friends over from interstate. We had organised this beautiful celebration where the kids were going to be able to play together and the adults could all, and it went pear-shaped.
Yeah. And really common though. It's really lovely. And thank you for sharing that, because I think also too, that is our world. That is our world when you're dealing with complexities or health, that the plans can go out the window really quickly, but that also has a ripple effect, like you're saying, on the siblings and yourself as parents. And how do we deal with that? In the moment, we've all got to let off steam because we're all a bit frustrated by it all. But it's great to hear you say just about being vulnerable. And no, it's not about emotionally dumping. It's about emotionally being vulnerable.
Yeah. When you do have the thing where all of a sudden you're like, okay, well, we're not having the picnic on the beach. Afterwards, talking about, okay, I was a bit frustrated by that. Were you frustrated by that? And
yeah.
Place to say, yeah, that wasn't what I thought Christmas Eve was going to be, and I was disappointed, and not getting upset with them when they are disappointed when things don't happen as they anticipated they would be.
Yeah. So, Shannon, it's lovely that you even just shared that about your own family. And that kind of leads me into that next question is, like, you're talking about the support that we can provide siblings. And obviously, like you said, you hear from a lot of parents. We at HeartKids, we talk about that village, and I'm sure you're the same at Siblings Australia, talking about that village. The question that we get asked, or we're finding that we're getting asked more and more now, and it's great that we have this podcast that we can share, is how does that extended family, how can they help? What advice would you give if someone was saying, hey, I'm coming to you, I'm a parent of, but it's actually my mum and dad, they don't know what to do, or they don't know how to help, or I've got my auntie around the corner. What's your advice there?
I think the thing is, when you are the parent, you are so up to your eyeballs in the health needs or the disability needs of the child who has got the sort of additional needs. That's when the village becomes really important. I think the other thing with the village is your sibling child doesn't want to burden mum and dad. They know that mum and dad are stressed. They know that mum and dad are worried. So they don't want to do that additional, this is what's going on for me a lot of the time. And so your village, and when we talk about family, I take family really broadly. I'm very lucky that I have got actual aunties and uncles for my kids who are engaged with their lives. But then we've got all of those honorary aunties and uncles, and they are very much an important part of my kids' village. There are other adult people in my kids' lives who I've identified as, okay, well, you're a really important adult type person in my child's life, and I know I can talk to you about what's going on. So I think as the parent, being able to say, hey, my sibling child is struggling with this a bit, can you just spend that bit of extra time that perhaps you don't have the bandwidth for at the moment? Kids will often also have those conversations with those other people that they won't have with mum and dad. I know for myself, I've got a niece who occasionally I will pull her aside and I will say to her, hey, there are some things going on at the moment, and I know you're not going to talk to your mum about them,
but here I am.
Let's have a chat. And she'll tell me things that she won't necessarily tell her mum. And it's not about secret keeping from the parents, obviously, if my niece was to tell me something that her mum needed to know. But some of that emotional stuff that she just needs support with, it's easier to talk to that person who's not your mum, or who's not your dad, or who's not your carer person, adult person who's directly in your life every day. I think it's really important that we activate the village, that we say to the village, I actually need you to be my sibling child's person. I need you to be the person who they can come to. And looking outside of that traditional family setup of grandparents or aunties or uncles, to also look at who are the adults in your child's life who they trust, who you trust, to be able to go to. My son has got a basketball coach who is just a phenomenal young man. And there have been a couple of times where my son has been struggling with some things, and I've just reached out to this coach and said, hey, can you just have a bit of a chat with him? And I know that he's going to get a very different, I mean, he's very cool. He is your 6'9" basketball playing 20 something, way cooler than mum me. But he's more willing to have some of those conversations in that space than he would ever have with me. So working out who those additional adult people are who are in your circles, who you can activate to bring in to support your sibling child is really important. And I think being really explicit with some of them of, thank you, but I need you to be my sibling child's support. It's great that you're here having a coffee with me, and I really appreciate that.
Can you go and knock on the room of my teenage daughter or son and just check in? And I think that's great advice, Shannon, because I think sometimes we do think that village has to be blood related. And like you said, it looks different for everyone. And it could also be that all your family are on a different side of the country, or you grew up somewhere else, but because of work, you've moved to a different location. But I think it's a great way of looking at that village can be extended, and that village. And I suppose the big thing I'm taking away from what you're saying is if they're value aligned with how you are value aligned as a family, it doesn't matter if they're the 6'9" basketball coach. It might be just someone else that's just checking in. So with that, Shannon, obviously we've chatted earlier about sort of looking at how do you support, how do you know when someone's struggling? But you also talked about right at the beginning that you've heard from siblings who are now adults. That must be really insightful for you to help inform, obviously, what an adult needs is different to what a child might, like a younger primary school child or a teen needs. How do you navigate that? Are you finding that that journey is different and reflective of that? So the needs of what you're hearing from adults, has that informed now the resources that you're developing for kids?
It absolutely has. And it's also informed the way that we work with families broadly. I suppose there are a lot of fears that you have as a parent, but one of the fears that I have when I think about sort of longer term being a parent is you hear of sibling children going no contact with their parents as adults. And we have a lot of adult siblings who we work with who have chosen to go no contact with their parents or with their families more broadly.
Wow, that's really confronting, isn't it?
Yeah, it is that. Oh my goodness. If anything keeps me up at night, I'm not one of these people who stays awake at night worrying about things, but if it was, it would be the idea of that. And the way that they talk about the fact that their needs were undervalued or dismissed or not considered when they were growing up has really informed some of the resources and the ways that we talk to families about younger children. And it is really around that communication piece that adult siblings talk to us about that. And it's a communication piece that goes across the lifespan. So we work across the lifespan from early childhood right through to end of life planning with siblings. A lot of what it all comes down to is that communication piece. When adult siblings are talking about when they were children, they talk about the fact that they did have that confusion. They didn't know what was going on. Mum and dad tried to shield them from what was going on. They didn't really understand what was happening, and then that just compounded their fears and their concerns, or they didn't feel seen and heard and what have you. And then through to adulthood, we still have a lot of adult siblings saying to us, I know at some stage I'm going to take on some sort of care responsibilities for my brother or sister.
Ah, of course, yep.
But mum and dad still don't want to talk to me about it.
Wow, yeah, tough conversations and big conversations.
Yeah, they absolutely are. There are things that change as people age, but the theme still runs through that communication piece is sort of the number one thing that siblings talk about. The fact that they haven't had that communication that they would have liked with their parents. I know I go on and on and on about it, but that communication piece is so important across the lifespan at an appropriate level so that the siblings feel like they're being seen and supported through that process as well, which it's integral. It really has informed. I've been with the organisation now for just over 2 years, and it was talking to some of those adult siblings that's really informed the way that I now work with families, and I talk to audiences like yours about what's needed is make sure that you are having those open communication channels with your children and making sure that they are part of the discussions. The other thing that I think is really important for parents to remember is oftentimes your children will have conversations with each other that they would never have with you. When you're talking to your sibling child and you've got a really open communication with them, they might actually have really valuable input into what proper quality healthcare supports looks like for their brother or sister, because they're bringing a different perspective, because they're having much more honest conversations with their brother or sister than perhaps the child who's got the heart condition or disability or what have you might have with their mum or dad.
That's really insightful, you sharing that, because it's almost like, and it's so true, isn't it? I've got 3 kids and you've got children and extended children as well. And it's so true. It's almost like the conversations they have are just, there's no filter. It's not that sort of wise, selecting our words and going about things. It's just a no filter conversation. That's really insightful. I really actually take a lot from that. And I think many listening will, that it's great to actually engage in those bigger conversations too, because it's not just about what we probably think our heart kids or our children need. It could be actually putting it to the sibling and involving them in a different way.
Yeah.
What do you think and it's funny you say that, like I sit here and I'm thinking, and I know my children have engaged your services and absolutely love it. And it's unpacked so many things for them. And I've seen their confidence grow, and I've seen their confidence grow in a way in which they're proud, as opposed to feeling like it's a burden. They feel like, actually, I'm not alone and there's other people. And if I can let other people know that they're not alone. But it's interesting you say that, because I know in my case, Coco, who's my eldest, as you know, will say, no, Mum, Frank doesn't like that anymore. And I go, pardon, what? Because again, I'm being the adult. I've gone into automatic pilot. I've finished work for the day and I'm doing this and I'm doing that. And she's saying to me, no, Mum, he doesn't like that anymore. He doesn't watch whatever it is. A bit like you referencing Thomas the Tank. It's like, Mum, he's not into that anymore. And I just revolt back. But you're right. They're on a completely different level with each other, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. It can manifest in all sorts of ways. First of all, thank you very much for saying that about your family's experiences with Siblings Australia. That is really warms cockles of my heart.
Oh, we're big fans. You know it. As you know, I have to be careful with what I share as well, but I know that there was an in-person event and my children still speak about it when they speak with other people, that I think you know that they turned up and there was someone else there that they knew. They knew them. They were part of their school community. But that person felt that they couldn't identify as a sibling, and also too didn't want other people to know that they had a sibling. I'm not sure if it was a chronic health condition or a disability, but still they were nervous about sharing that information for fear of being, I'm assuming, judged or whatever it may be. Whereas I know my girls now, they're proud. They're proud and they know that they're not the only one.
Yeah, as an aside, they're turning into fantastic advocates for other young people who are siblings and getting out there and speaking about that. It can be things about what you like, and your son's outgrown this particular TV show that you're just automatically putting on for him.
Yes.
Your heart kid might say to you, no, I'm not worried about school. I've missed a bit, but I'm feeling totally across it. And you talk to their brother or sister and they say, oh, no, actually, do you know they're not sleeping? Like, they are staying up at night because they are so freaked out. And it's that sort of information that if you're having really honest, open conversations within your family, everyone's going to have better outcomes. It's going to be, you're going to be able to then support your heart kid with making sure that, okay, well, you're struggling with maths, let's bring in a tutor for you, or let's see if you're working with a charity perhaps that has tutoring support as part of your health journey, we can tap into that. But you're then actually going, okay, well, I know that I'm doing the right thing by my family, and the sibling has got a relationship where they know that they can talk to everyone within the family about what's going on. It's better outcomes for everybody.
Yeah, and it stems from what you said. And don't worry, this is what this podcast is all for, is like you said, I don't want to keep repeating myself or banging on about it, but it sounds like communication is key and those lines just need to be open everywhere. Shannon, I suppose I'd love to bring it back to then, with all the things that you've seen and you've taken on board and you've developed these resources and these programs for the HeartKids community. What sort of resources and support services are out there for them? Like, how would they tap into Siblings Australia?
Yeah, sure. What I would say to families is, first of all, go to our website and have a look what's on there. We've got a number of online resources, but also links through to other resources. And if there isn't the immediate thing on there that you're looking for that works for your family, please contact us. We offer specialised counselling for sibling children of all ages. We also offer family counselling through our services. We've got some online resources for parents about how do you sort of recognise what's going on for your sibling children. We have got online communities for teenagers which are in a moderated forum so they can come together to talk about their experiences. But there are additional resources. We know we are one organisation. Every family has different. We are really well connected across Australia. Last year we worked with 500 other organisations.
Wow.
Yeah, huge, right?
Absolutely huge.
And a lot of that is us providing them support around what does it look like to support siblings. But that's also made us very aware of what other resources are out there. So if we, and we're not experts on everything, I'd love to be, but I'm only human.
You're doing a great job, Shan. You're doing a really good job at being human.
If we don't have the resources within our toolkit, or we are really well connected across a whole range of sectors. So we can work with families to make sure that we can link you up with what it is that you need in your specific circumstance. But I would say definitely go to our website. It is broken down by age group. It's broken down by whether you're the sibling yourself or whether you're a parent who's looking for support. And you can have a look there and go from there. But yeah, please always contact us and we will help you find what it is that you're looking for, whether it's within our resources or something more local to where it is that you're located.
And I think that it sounds like you're a conduit, aren't you? You're a really important piece of our fabric and framework as we are as families who are going along journeys. I'm sure you live it too, Shan. You live it. We live it, everyone in the community and the majority of people listening. But I think also too, it's great for people who are listening, who are on that, a part of that village and a part of that extended network, because we need to also to raise the profile of these resources that are out there, also to extend into that clinical setting as well. I think sometimes a lot of us all of a sudden get thrust into the medical system and we're trying to just absorb what's going on. Like you said, those conversations and these little people are hearing it too. And what does this all mean? And then we're trying to process it. So it's just great to hear you say, land on the site. It sounds like you'll just come in and swoop us up and then say, okay, where to next?
Yeah, and look, we are very big on how do we make sure that we are part of broader discussion. So, for example, there's a research project being led by a researcher out of La Trobe University at the moment, and it's around paediatric intensive care, and it's looking at the sibling experience when you've got a child who's in paediatric intensive care. And what the lead researcher there had found was that when you're looking at family supports in paediatric intensive care units, we're talking about parent supports, and it's often the case when we're talking about family supports that it's actually code for parent supports rather than family.
Yes.
She's doing this project looking across Australia around what does sibling support, what does actually good quality sibling support look like in paediatric intensive care units, because coming back to that point that kids don't have the emotional resources necessarily to navigate these spaces. How do we make sure that they're being supported through this as well? So we try to very actively be involved with different research projects that are going on that touch on HeartKids or families with disabilities, and how do we make sure that we're doing things that are really research informed, but we're also feeding into that research. So there might be instances with projects like that where engaging with Siblings Australia, we might be able to say to you, well, this project's going on at the moment and they're looking for families who've had this particular experience that can then feed into that sort of bigger, longer term research that's happening in the space.
Yeah, amazing. That's phenomenal to even hear that research is being undertaken. Like, it just shows how far we've come, isn't it? Like, we've gone from probably, like you said, starting out, like hearing from those adults that they've been sheltered because they've been sheltered from that. They haven't had those open communication lines. We now know how important communication is. You've spoken about that. And also, too, the importance of just making them feel seen and heard, even if it's just in those 5 minutes. So, Shan, I really appreciate your time tonight. But I'd love you to just answer one more question for me. And that is, what advice would you give parents? They're trying to balance this. They're trying to understand, how do we live this intensive life, supporting the child that needs the health or the care that they need, but then also to making sure that we don't leave the siblings behind?
I would say to parents, treat yourself. Take the advice that you would give the person that you love most in the world, your best friend, if they were in the same situation and you were giving them advice, take that advice that you would give to them and use it for yourself. Be kind to yourself. Make sure that you are looking after yourself. You can't pour from an empty bucket. Make sure that you're being looked after. Make sure that you're not putting too much pressure on yourself. No one can be everything to everybody. Make sure that you are turning up for the people that you love when they need you, but understand that you can't do everything.
Beautiful, Shan. Absolutely beautiful. Thank you for the work that you do. Thank you, Shan, for flying the flag for all those children around the world and the siblings across Australia. And thank you. Thank you for sharing tonight.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's been great. Thanks, Sami.
Sometimes this podcast talks about some heavy things. If this brings up anything for you or someone you love, it is important to reach out for support. The HeartKids helpline provides support and guidance for anyone impacted by CHD. You can call the helpline on 1800 432 785. To access more information about CHD, as well as support from HeartKids, visit the website at heartkids.org.au. The information on this podcast is not a substitute for medical advice from your doctor or healthcare team. Always talk to your doctor about matters that affect you or your family's health.